My daughter-in-law left her 5-year-old autistic son at my door and never came back. That was 13 years ago. I raised Alex myself in my garage workshop, teaching him everything I knew about fixing things and building solutions from the ground up. Everyone said he'd never succeed. Too different, too difficult. They were wrong. By 18, he'd built a cybersecurity company worth $4.8 million right from our garage in Portland, Oregon. Then the local news covered his story. 2 weeks later, my doorbell rang. Sarah, my former daughter-in-law, standing there with a lawyer and documents claiming she'd been involved the whole time. Custody papers, financial records, visit logs, all lies, but they looked real enough to fool a judge. Our lawyer reviewed them and said without proof they're forged, we might lose everything. I panicked. Alex didn't. He leaned over and whispered, "Let her talk, Grandpa." I stared at him. We were about to lose everything and he wanted her to keep lying. But he just sat there calm, watching, and I had no idea what he was about to do. My name is Thomas Mitchell. I'm 71 years old, and this is my story. Before we continue, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and subscribe to our channel. We're creating a community of people who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now, back to the story. Sarah showed up on a Friday in November 2011 with Alex and one backpack. "Just for the weekend, Tom," she said at my front door. "I need a break, please." Alex stood beside her, 5 years old, staring at the porch floor. He rocked back and forth, heel to toe. His hands covered his ears even though we weren't making noise. "Sarah, what's wrong?" I started to ask. I'd been expecting this call for months. My son Peter had been deployed to Afghanistan with the Marines, and Sarah had been struggling alone with Alex's needs. "I'll call you Sunday." She was already turning away, walking fast toward her beat-up Honda. She didn't hug Alex, didn't kiss him goodbye, just left like she was dropping off a package. I watched her taillights disappear down Maple Street. Alex kept rocking. I'd spent 6 years in the Navy before my 28-year career as a mechanical engineer at Boeing. I'd worked with all kinds of people, solved complex problems under pressure, managed teams building aircraft that carried hundreds of lives. But standing there with my grandson in my doorway, I realized I knew almost nothing about actually living with autism. "Hey, Alex," I said softly, using the same calm voice I'd learned in the Navy for talking to scared recruits. "Want to come inside?" He didn't look at me, didn't move, just rocked. I picked up his backpack, a faded SpongeBob bag that felt way too light for a weekend stay. I opened the door wider, waited with the patience the Navy had taught me. After a minute, Alex walked past me into the house, still covering his ears. The refrigerator hummed. He flinched like it was a gunshot. The heater clicked on. He pressed his hands tighter to his head. I closed the door as quietly as I could, remembering how we'd learned to move silently on ship decks during night watch. He was already in the living room, crouched in the corner by my bookshelf where I kept my engineering manuals and old Navy photos. "Are you hungry?" I asked, keeping my voice low and steady. "Nothing." "Thirsty?" He rocked faster. I went to the kitchen, poured water in a blue plastic cup I kept for when he visited. Those visits had been rare, maybe twice a year since Peter shipped out, always short and tense. I brought the cup to him, set it on the floor an arm's length away like offering food to a scared animal. He stopped rocking, looked at the cup with those intense brown eyes that reminded me of Peter at that age, then went back to rocking. That first night was a disaster. I made chicken nuggets and fries for dinner because Sarah had mentioned once that's what he ate. Alex took one look at the plate and turned away like I'd offered him poison. I tried pasta. No response. I tried a sandwich cut into triangles. He pushed it across the table. "What do you want to eat, buddy?" I asked, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. He hummed a low sound in his throat and stared at the wall where I had a framed photo of the USS Enterprise, the carrier where I'd served as a young seaman. I gave him crackers from the cabinet. He ate 3, slowly, methodically. Bedtime was worse than anything I'd faced in boot camp. I tried to help him brush his teeth, and he screamed, not crying, screaming like I was torturing him. The sound cut through me. I stepped back immediately and he stopped, but his whole body was shaking. "Okay," I said, hands up like surrendering. "Okay, you can skip it tonight." I led him to the guest room, tried to tuck the blanket around him the way I remembered doing for Peter when he was small. Alex threw it off violently. I tried again. He screamed. I left the blanket at the foot of the bed and backed out of the room, feeling like I'd failed my first mission. He didn't sleep. I could hear him humming all night through the thin walls, that same low sound over and over like a ship's engine. I didn't sleep either, lying in my own bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell I'd gotten myself into and how I was going to take care of this child when I couldn't even get him to eat dinner or sleep through the night. Saturday morning came too soon. I got up at 0600 out of habit, old Navy routine never dies, and found Alex already awake in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, staring at nothing. Or maybe staring at everything. It was hard to tell. I called Sarah. No answer. Left a message using my command voice from the service. "Sarah, this is Tom. Call me back immediately. I need to know what Alex eats, what his routines are, everything." She didn't call back. I tried again. Saturday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night. Nothing but voicemail. 1 week became 2. I took Alex to the pediatrician, Dr. Martinez, a kind woman who'd been practicing in Portland for 20 years. "Mr. Mitchell, has anyone talked to you about getting Alex properly evaluated?" she asked after examining him. His mother was supposed to handle that. Dr. Martinez nodded slowly, making notes. "Well, you're handling it now. This child shows clear signs of autism spectrum disorder. We need to get him into therapy immediately. Speech, occupational, behavioral. The earlier the intervention, the better the outcomes. I enrolled him in therapy at the Portland Children's Center, 3 times a week, sometimes 4. I learned things I never knew I needed to know. Alex needed the same breakfast every single day. Scrambled eggs, no salt, toast cut corner to corner, nothing touching on the plate. The route to therapy had to be exactly the same, or he'd scream in the car like we were under attack. I learned not to touch him unless he initiated it, learned to watch his hands for signs he was getting overwhelmed. The Navy had taught me to observe before acting, to gather intelligence before making decisions. I got good at watching Alex, really watching, the way I used to watch the horizon for enemy ships. 2 weeks after Alex arrived, I found him in the living room at dawn. He was on the floor with a bin of toy cars I'd bought him, lining them up in a perfect row. But it wasn't random. He'd arranged them by color in a way I couldn't understand at first. I sat on the couch and watched, the way I'd watched sonar screens for hours during my Navy days. Red car, then one that was slightly more orange, then one more orange than the last, then yellow-green, creating this gradient so subtle I had to squint to see the differences. He'd organized them by shade perfectly, better than any engineer's color chart I'd ever seen at Boeing. "That's amazing, Alex," I said quietly. He didn't look at me, but he kept arranging, his small hands moving with precision that reminded me of technicians calibrating instruments. December came. Sarah still hadn't called. I tried a different approach with Alex, applying what I'd learned in the service about working with different personalities under stress. I stopped trying to get him to look at me, stopped pushing him to talk. I just made sure everything was the same every single day. Same breakfast at 0730, same route to therapy, same PBS Kids shows at 1600, same bedtime routine that he'd finally tolerated, me saying goodnight from the doorway at 2000 hours. He calmed down. Not happy maybe, but less frantic. He'd sit in the living room with me while I read technical manuals or worked on electronics projects at my workbench. He'd eat meals without pushing the plate away. Progress measured in small victories. On Christmas Eve, I was in my garage workshop building Alex a wooden toy truck. I'd converted half the garage into a proper workshop years ago. Pegboards full of tools. A solid workbench I'd built myself. Good lighting. The space smelled like sawdust and WD-40. Familiar and comforting. The phone rang. I grabbed it, hoping against hope. "Sarah?" "Tom." Her voice was flat, tired, defeated. "Sarah, thank God. When are you coming to get him? He needs you. I need to know what I'm doing wrong here. He barely talks. He won't. I can't do this anymore, Tom." I stopped moving, my hand frozen on the half-finished truck. "What do you mean?" "He's yours." I tried. I really tried, but I can't handle it. I can't handle him. "Sarah, wait. You can't just..." "I'm not cut out to be a mother to a kid like that. You are. You're good with him. You're patient. I'm not patient. I'm terrified half the time." Her voice cracked. "He's better off with you. I know that sounds terrible, but it's true. Sarah, please." The line went dead. I called back immediately. It rang and rang. No answer. I tried again, straight to voicemail. I stood there in my garage with the phone in my hand, sawdust on my boots, the smell of wood stain in the air, and realized my life had just changed forever. Alex appeared in the doorway between the garage and the house. He looked at me for a long moment, longer than he'd ever looked at me before. Then he walked to my workbench, picked up the blue cup I'd given him that first day, he'd started carrying it everywhere, and brought it to me. He set it on the workbench beside the half-finished truck. I looked at the cup, looked at him. His brown eyes held something I couldn't name. Understanding, maybe, or acceptance. He went back to the house without a word. I cried, standing there in my garage, surrounded by the tools and projects that had always made sense to me, holding a blue plastic cup and wondering how I was going to raise an autistic child when I could barely figure out what he wanted for breakfast. The years after that blurred together like a long deployment at sea, routine punctuated by moments of breakthrough. I kept everything exactly the same for Alex. Same breakfast every morning at 07:30, eggs and toast, same route everywhere we went, same bedtime routine, same everything. When I kept it consistent, he was okay. Not happy maybe, but stable. The Navy had taught me the power of routine under stress. On a ship, everyone knows exactly where they're supposed to be at any given moment. Lives depend on it. With Alex, I learned that his whole world depended on the same kind of predictability. When he turned 6, Alex became obsessed with a set of magnetic letters I'd bought him at the dollar store. He'd arrange them on the refrigerator for hours, not words, but patterns, groups, sequences I couldn't understand. Then he started drawing symbols in little notebooks, filling page after page with circles, lines, tick marks, tracking something only he understood. At therapy, I asked Dr. Foster about it. She was Alex's new behavioral therapist, a patient woman who reminded me of the Navy chaplains. Calm, wise, never rushing to judgment. He makes these marks everywhere, I said, showing her one of his notebooks. Should I be worried? Dr. Foster shook her head, examining Alex's careful symbols. He's tracking his world, Mr. Mitchell. It helps him feel secure. Let him do it. So I did. He filled notebook after notebook with his symbols and marks, like a navigator charting unknown waters. By the time he turned 7, the symbols became letters. Then short words: egg, toast, school, home, simple things, but written in neat block letters that looked like engineering drawings. At 8, he was writing full sentences. Times, what he ate, where we went, what happened. A daily log more detailed than anything I'd kept in the service. He learned to make eye contact sometimes, little flickers like sunlight on water. He learned to tolerate the grocery store if we went at the same time every week. He learned that I wasn't going to leave, wasn't going to change things without warning, wasn't going to abandon ship. One morning in spring when he was 8, I was making breakfast in the kitchen. Eggs, toast, same as always. Alex sat at the table with his notebook, writing something with that intense concentration he brought to everything. Why did Mom leave? I nearly dropped the spatula. In 3 years, this was the first real question he'd asked about Sarah. I turned around. Alex was looking at his notebook, not at me, but he'd spoken clearly, directly. I sat down across from him, choosing my words the way I'd learned to choose them when talking to grieving families after accidents at Boeing. She said she couldn't handle taking care of you. He nodded once, wrote something in his notebook, went back to staring at the page. His handwriting was getting better, more controlled. I got up, finished making breakfast, put his plate in front of him exactly the way he liked it. Then I went to the bathroom and cried where he couldn't hear me, the way I'd cried in private after telling families their sons or husbands wouldn't be coming home. He'd spoken. He'd asked the question I didn't know how to answer honestly, but I told him the truth anyway. That's all I had to give him. The truth, and eggs and toast every morning, and the same blue cup, and the promise that I wouldn't leave. A year after Alex first spoke to me about Sarah, the school called with what they called a situation. It was September 2014. Alex was 9, starting 4th grade. I thought we'd moved past the hardest parts. He was talking in full sentences now, eating in the cafeteria without meltdowns, even raising his hand in class sometimes when he knew the answer. Then Principal Andrews wanted to move him to a special classroom. "Mr. Mitchell, we need to discuss Alex's placement," he said over the phone in that tone administrators use when they've already made up their minds. "What's the problem?" I asked, feeling my blood pressure rise the way it used to when dealing with incompetent officers. "Alex would be better served in our special needs classroom. The other students are moving at a different pace. I grip the phone. Alex keeps up with the work. His grades are above average. It's not about academics, Mr. Mitchell. It's about social integration. He doesn't participate in group activities. He won't make eye contact during circle time. Yesterday he covered his ears during music class because it's loud. He has sensory issues that are documented in his IEP. We have a program designed for children like Alex. It would be less stressful for everyone. Less stressful for the teacher, he meant. Less disruptive to their neat little classroom where everyone was supposed to fit the same mold. I want an IEP meeting, I said, using my command voice. We can arrange that. This week. Silence. Then, I'll have my secretary call you. I spent 3 days preparing for that meeting like I was planning a military operation. I printed every report card, every therapy progress note, every piece of documentation I'd kept in folders organized with the same precision I'd learned keeping ship maintenance records. Alex's reading was above grade level. His math was 2 years ahead. His handwriting was careful and neat, every letter perfectly formed like technical drawings. The problem wasn't that he couldn't learn. The problem was that he learned differently, and different scared them. That evening, I spread all the meeting notes across my kitchen table and started organizing them into a 3-ring binder with color-coded tabs: medical, educational, therapy, legal. My hands knew this work from years of engineering documentation and Navy paperwork. Alex came in from the living room where he'd been watching his favorite show, the same episode of How It's Made he watched every Friday. His blue cup sat on the counter where he always left it, within sight but not in the way. He stood watching me work, those brown eyes taking in everything. "What are you doing?" he asked. His speech had grown stronger over the year, more fluid and confident, making sure the school remembers what you can do. He moved closer, studying the papers spread across the table like battle plans. "Can I help?" I glanced at him, surprised. In all the years we'd lived together, Alex had never volunteered to help with anything that wasn't part of his established routine. "Sure, buddy." We worked together for the next hour. I showed him my system, how I was organizing everything by category and date. He studied it with the same intensity he brought to arranging his toy cars, then pointed to the therapy section. These should be sorted by date first, then by type. Speech therapy separate from occupational therapy, separate from behavioral therapy. I looked at where he was pointing. He was absolutely right. That would make much more sense for presenting to the school board. "Show me," I said. He rearranged the entire section in 10 minutes, creating a system I wouldn't have thought of. Logical, clean, and perfect. I watched him work, his hands moving fast and sure, completely focused. He understood organization on a level I'd never reach, the way some people understand music or mathematics. Pattern and structure and order came naturally to him the way reading blueprints came to me. "That's really good, Alex," I said when he finished. He nodded once, didn't smile, but I could tell he was pleased with his work. The IEP meeting was held on a Friday afternoon in the school's conference room. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead like the engine room of a ship. Principal Andrews sat at the head of the table looking like an officer who'd already decided the battle plan. Mrs. Peterson sat next to him, Alex's teacher, a woman with kind eyes but tired shoulders. The school psychologist was there, along with the special education coordinator, all of them with thick folders. I had one folder, but it was organized exactly the way Alex had shown me. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Mitchell," Principal Andrews said in that tone that meant he was doing me a favor. "We all want what's best for Alex." "So do I said, settling into my chair the way I used to settle into briefings, ready for battle. Mrs. Peterson spoke first, her voice soft and sympathetic. "Alex is a sweet boy, but he struggles with social interaction. He doesn't participate in group activities. During cooperative learning time, he sits alone. He refuses to engage with his peers." "Does he complete his assignments?" I asked. She hesitated. "Yes, but education isn't just about worksheets, Mr. Mitchell. It's about learning to work with others, to communicate, to function in society." "He's autistic," I interrupted. "Communication and social interaction are harder for him, but he's trying, and he's making progress." The special education coordinator, Ms. Gray, leaned forward. "Our resource room offers a smaller setting with fewer distractions. Students who understand his challenges. It would be much better for Alex. Students who can't keep up academically," I said, my Navy training keeping my voice level despite the anger building inside me. "That's not Alex." Principal Andrews used his administrator voice, reasonable, patient, condescending. Mr. Mitchell, I understand you want Alex in a mainstream classroom, but we have to consider the needs of all our students. Are you telling me Alex is disruptive to other students? Not disruptive exactly. Then what's the real problem here? Ms. Gray opened her folder and pulled out test results. Alex's social skills assessment shows significant delays. His IQ testing was inconclusive because he refused to finish several sections, because they were timed, and that made him anxious. His therapist documented that anxiety response. It's in his file. Which brings us back to our point, Principal Andrews said. Alex needs support we simply can't provide in a regular classroom setting. I opened my folder and pulled out the first document, placing it in front of Principal Andrews like evidence in a court-martial. This is Alex's reading comprehension test from last month, 97th percentile, 7th grade. Level. I pulled out the next document. Math assessment, 100%, 5th grade material, and he finished it in half the allotted time. I kept pulling papers, stacking them methodically in front of the principal. These are therapy notes showing his progress in speech development, emotional regulation, and sensory tolerance. He's advanced further in 5 years than anyone predicted, not because he was hidden away in a special room with low expectations, but because people believed he could do more. Mrs. Peterson looked uncomfortable. Mr. Mitchell, it's not about expectations. Yes, it is, I said, and for the first time, I let some of my anger show. You want him somewhere else because he makes you uncomfortable, because he doesn't perform normal the way you want normal to look. The room went quiet. Principal Andrews cleared his throat. Mr. Mitchell, I understand you're frustrated, but we have legal obligations. Under IDEA, Alex has the right to the least restrictive environment, I said, pulling out the legal documentation I'd researched. That means mainstream classroom with appropriate supports, not segregation because he learns differently. I shouldn't have used that word, segregation, but I was tired of being diplomatic. We're not suggesting segregation, Ms. Gray said quickly. Just a more appropriate educational setting. Then provide the appropriate supports in his current classroom, I said. Noise-canceling headphones for music class, extra time for transitions, a quiet corner if he gets overwhelmed. That's accommodation, not removal. They looked at each other like officers trying to figure out how to retreat gracefully. Principal Andrews sighed. We'll draft an IEP with those accommodations, he said finally. But Mr. Mitchell, if Alex continues to struggle with social integration, he won't, I said with more confidence than I felt. And if he does, we'll address it then. But you don't solve problems by giving up on kids. I walked out of that meeting feeling like I'd won a battle, but I knew the war was far from over. Alex was waiting for me in the truck, reading one of his notebooks. How did it go? He asked without looking up. We won this round, I said. He nodded once and went back to his notebook. But I caught him almost smiling. The next year brought new challenges and unexpected discoveries. When Alex turned 10, his speech therapist, Dr. Foster, suggested we get him a tablet for communication support, something to type on when speaking felt too hard, or when he needed to organize his thoughts. I saved up from my Boeing pension and bought him one for his birthday. Within a day, he had it figured out completely. Within a week, he'd downloaded a scanning app and started photographing every page of his notebooks, creating digital copies with the same methodical precision he brought to everything. I watched him work one afternoon, hunched over the tablet at the kitchen table, scanning page after page of his symbols and notes. Why are you doing that? I asked. So I don't lose anything, he said without looking up from the screen. Paper gets lost. Digital doesn't if you back it up right. At the therapy group sessions for parents that I attended monthly, other fathers would ask me questions during coffee breaks. How did I get Alex to cooperate? What was my secret for handling the meltdowns? How did I stay so patient when everything was a struggle? I don't handle him, I always said. I listen to him. I watch what he needs and try to provide it. One man, Peter Rodriguez, whose son Carlos was 7 and mostly nonverbal, shook his head. But how do you keep from losing your temper? How do you stay calm when nothing works? I thought about that, remembering the worst days at sea when equipment failed and lives were on the line. I guess I stopped trying to make him be someone else. I started trying to understand who he actually is. Peter looked at me like I'd shared some profound wisdom, but it wasn't wisdom. It was just survival. The only thing that worked. Alex started noticing patterns everywhere that year. We'd be driving to therapy and he'd say, "The traffic light on Morrison Street is mistimed." It stays red 45 seconds longer than the optimal cycle for this intersection volume. I had no idea if that was true, but I started timing it. He was right. Every time. At the grocery store, he'd look at the receipt and point out pricing errors before we even got to the car. The apples were marked $2.99 per pound, but they charged $3.02. That's the old price from last week. He was right every time. The cashiers started to recognize us, and some would double-check their scanning when they saw Alex coming. Once, at a parent-teacher conference that fall, Principal Andrews smiled at me while explaining Alex's progress, going through the motions of positive engagement. But something felt off about his demeanor. In the truck afterward, Alex said, "He doesn't like me." "What? No, buddy. He was being nice. He said good things about your work." His facial expression didn't match his words, Alex said, staring out the window with that analytical look I'd come to recognize. When people genuinely smile, the muscles around their eyes contract. His didn't. The smile was only in his mouth. He was performing politeness. I drove in silence, processing this. Alex was 10 years old, and he could read micro-expressions better than trained interrogators I'd known in the Navy. By the time he turned 11 and started 5th grade, I thought we'd found our rhythm. Alex was thriving academically, his social skills were slowly improving, and we had a good relationship with most of his teachers. Then Mrs. Wagner called me at home one Tuesday afternoon. "Mr. Mitchell, Alex disrupted my class today." My stomach dropped. We'd been doing so well. "What happened?" I was teaching long division to the class. Alex stood up in the middle of my explanation and corrected me in front of everyone. I paused, processing this. Was he right? Long silence. "That's not the point, Mr. Mitchell. That's exactly the point." Was his correction accurate? Yes, but then he was helping. He saw an error and corrected it. "Mr. Mitchell, he embarrassed me in front of my students. He needs to understand there's a time and a place for corrections. He can't just interrupt adults." "He's 11 years old with autism," I said, feeling my patience wearing thin. "He sees a mathematical error. His brain compels him to correct it. That's how he's wired. Would you rather he sat there knowing you were teaching the wrong method?" Another parent conference, another stack of paperwork. This time they wanted to label him with oppositional defiant disorder. I brought 6 months of Dr. Foster's assessments showing that Alex wasn't defiant. He was direct, factual, and honest. He didn't understand social hierarchies that said adults were always right even when they were demonstrably wrong. "He's not being disrespectful," I explained to the school psychologist, a tired-looking woman who'd probably seen it all. "He's being accurate. There's a difference between defiance and precision." They agreed to drop the label, but barely. I could see the reluctance in their eyes. That night, Alex asked me a question over dinner that stopped me cold. Why do they want me to be different? I set down my fork, looking at this remarkable kid who could spot mathematical errors and read faces like technical manuals. "What do you mean?" "The teachers, the other kids, the administrators, everyone wants me to act like I'm not me. They want me to pretend I don't see the things I see. I didn't have a good answer." "Not really. How do you explain to an 11-year-old that the world often fears what it doesn't understand?" "Because they're scared of people who see more than they do," I said finally. "People who notice things others miss." He thought about that for a long moment, nodding slowly. "That's not logical." "No," I agreed. "It's not." A few weeks later, Alex asked if I had his birth certificate, then his social security card, then any other legal documents with his name on them. I assumed he was processing his identity, trying to understand his place in the world through official documentation. I helped him scan everything into his tablet, watching him create careful digital files with backup systems that would make a Navy quartermaster proud. "What are you building?" I asked one evening, watching him organize endless folders of documents and data. "A system," he said simply. "So nothing important gets lost." I had no idea he was preparing for a future I couldn't even imagine. That future started taking shape the summer Alex turned 12. He'd been scanning documents and organizing digital files for months by then, creating systems with a focus I'd learned not to interrupt. But in June 2017, he discovered something that would change everything. Coding. I found him at the kitchen table one afternoon with my old laptop open, staring at a screen full of text that looked like complete gibberish to me. Lines of words and symbols and brackets that might as well have been written in a foreign language. "What are you doing?" I asked, setting down my coffee. "Learning Python." He didn't look up from the screen. his fingers already moving across the keyboard with surprising confidence. What's Python? A programming language. I'm following an online tutorial. I leaned over his shoulder, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The screen showed instructions about variables and functions and loops, concepts that meant nothing to me but seemed to make perfect sense to Alex. Is this for school? No, I just want to learn it. I left him alone. That's what worked with Alex. Let him follow what interested him, the way I'd learned to let him arrange his cars and organize his notebooks. He spent the entire summer on that laptop, completely absorbed. While other kids in the neighborhood were at baseball camps or swimming at the community pool, Alex was coding. I'd bring him lunch at noon and he'd eat without looking away from the screen, his blue cup sitting beside the laptop, half full of water he'd forget to drink. By August, he was showing me things he'd created, little programs that performed tasks I didn't understand but could see were sophisticated. This one sorts files by date, he explained, running a program that instantly organized a messy folder on my desktop. This one finds duplicate photos. This one checks if a document has been modified since it was created. That's really impressive, Alex. He nodded, already turning back to his work. It's just logical instructions. Tell the computer exactly what to do, step by step. In September, I used some of my retirement savings to buy him a proper computer. Not my hand-me-down laptop that took 5 minutes to boot up, but a real desktop system with enough processing power for serious programming. The man at the electronics store asked what Alex would use it for. Programming, Alex said matter-of-factly. How old are you, son? 12. The salesman smiled. That's a great age to start. You'll go far with this. Alex didn't respond to the praise, just waited for me to finish the transaction. He never knew how to handle compliments from strangers. At home, he set up the new computer in his room with the same methodical precision he brought to everything. I made him promise to still come out for meals and to sleep at reasonable hours. He agreed, but I could tell his mind was already back in that world of code I couldn't enter. One evening in October, he called me to his room. I want to show you something. I sat on the edge of his bed while he pulled up a program on his screen. The interface was clean and simple, just boxes and buttons and text fields. What is it? Watch. He opened a document, a simple text file with a few sentences about homework assignments. Then he ran his program. Numbers appeared on the screen, long strings of them that meant nothing to me. That's the document's digital signature, he explained. Like a fingerprint, but for files. Okay, I said, not really understanding where this was going. He opened the document again, changed just one word, saved it, then ran the program again. Different numbers appeared on the screen. See? The signature changed completely. That means the document was altered. So you can tell if someone edits something. Yes. And when it was edited, and how many times, and what the original version looked like. He looked at me directly, which he rarely did during explanations. So things stay true, so people can't lie about what really happened. I thought about all those school meetings, all those times administrators had claimed they'd said one thing when I knew they'd said something else. All the times I'd wished I had some way to prove what had actually occurred. That's brilliant, Alex. He turned back to his screen. It's just pattern recognition. Digital instead of physical, just pattern recognition, as if that wasn't everything. The next year, when Alex was 13, the project expanded dramatically. I want to digitize all your binders, he said one morning at breakfast, the school meeting notes, the therapy records, all of it. I looked at him over my coffee, remembering the hours we'd spent organizing those documents by hand. That's a lot of scanning. We already did the legal stuff. I know, but I want everything in the system. What system? The one I'm building. So nothing gets lost or changed or misrepresented. I thought about those binders. Years of fights, years of advocacy, years of proof that Alex wasn't what ignorant people assumed he was. Okay, I said, but you're doing the scanning. These old bones can't handle that many hours hunched over a machine. We spent weeks on it. I'd pull out binders and Alex would scan page after page with the patience of a monk copying manuscripts. IEP meeting notes from 2014, therapy assessments from 2012, report cards, progress notes, incident reports. Every piece of paper that told Alex's story, documented with timestamps and verification codes I didn't understand. He didn't just scan them. Alex did something to each file on his computer, adding layers of information I couldn't see or understand. When I asked about it, he'd explain in terms that went over my head. "What are you adding to these files?" I asked one evening, watching him work with 3 monitors now displaying different screens of data. "Timestamps, verification codes, hash values," he said, not looking away from his work. "Each document connects to the ones before and after it, like links in a chain. If someone tries to change one link, the whole chain breaks. You can see exactly what was altered and when. Why would someone want to change them?" He looked at me with those serious brown eyes. "Why did Principal Andrews try to move me to the special classroom when I was 9? Fair point." I was beginning to understand that Alex wasn't just organizing information, he was building armor against a world that had already tried to diminish him. "So this protects the truth," I said. "Yes. Digital truth that can't be argued with." Our relationship had evolved by then into something comfortable and deep. We didn't need a lot of words. I'd mention something, he'd nod, he'd show me something on his computer, I'd tell him it was impressive. We had dinner together every night at 1800 hours. Same time, same seats. His blue cup always to the right of his plate, within easy reach. Comfortable silence with someone who understood you didn't need to fill every quiet moment with conversation. When Alex turned 14 in November 2018, he asked me something that seemed like a non sequitur. "Do you still have anything from when I first came to live with you?" "Like what? Receipts, calendars, bank statements, anything from 2011 or 2012? I frowned. "Why would you want that old stuff? I just want to see it. For the system." I led him out to the garage, showed him the boxes I'd never thrown away because old Navy habits die hard. You keep records. You document everything. Old tax documents, utility bills, bank statements going back over a decade, calendars where I'd written appointments and errands in my careful engineer's handwriting. "You kept all this?" he asked, looking almost amazed. "I spent 28 years at Boeing. We keep everything. Documentation saves lives in aerospace." He started going through the boxes methodically, pulled out my 2011 calendar, opened it to November. His finger traced down the dates until he found the day Sarah had brought him to my door, then the days after when I'd written things like "try chicken nuggets" and "call Sarah" and "doctor appointment." "Why do you need this?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect. "I need to know what really happened," he said quietly. "Not what people say happened. What actually happened, documented in real time." I sat down on an overturned crate, watching him examine the physical evidence of our early days together. "This is about your mom." He didn't answer immediately, just kept looking at the calendar, at my handwriting recording those desperate first weeks when I had no idea what I was doing. "I need to know the timeline," he said finally. "When things happened. What was real? What can be proved?" My chest tightened. He was processing Sarah's abandonment, but in his own analytical way, through documentation and verification rather than emotion. "We can scan all of it," I said. "Whatever you need." We brought the boxes inside and spent the next month scanning everything. Grocery receipts showing I'd never received financial support from Sarah. Phone bills proving she'd never called. Bank statements documenting every expense I'd paid alone. Calendars recording our routine, our life, every ordinary day that proved she'd been completely absent. I thought he was building a personal history, understanding his past through data and proof. I had no idea he was preparing evidence for a future battle I couldn't imagine. Alex started staying up later that year. I'd go to bed at 2200 and hear the click of his keyboard through the wall until well past midnight. Sometimes I'd get up and make him a sandwich or cut up an apple, leave it on his desk without saying anything. "Thanks, Grandpa," he'd murmur, not looking away from his screens. Some nights I'd wake at 0200 or 0300 and see light under his door, hear the constant tapping of keys like Morse code messages to the future. "Alex, you need to sleep," I'd say through the door. Almost done. He was never almost done. One night in February, I brought him tea at 0100. His room was cold. He'd forgotten to adjust the heat again. 3 monitors glowed with different screens of code and documents and flowing data that looked like mission control displays. "What are you making?" I asked, setting the mug beside his keyboard. He paused, actually turned to look at me. "Something that will help people know what's real and what's fake. What actually happened versus what someone claims happened." "That's really important to you." "Yes. Because of your mom." He thought about that for a moment. "Because people lie," he said simply. "And sometimes you need proof that can't be argued with or ignored." I kissed the top of his head. His hair was getting long again, needed cutting. Don't stay up all night, I said. I won't. But he did anyway. I'd find him asleep at his desk some mornings, head on his arms, monitors still glowing with endless streams of code. I'd put a blanket over him and make breakfast. He'd wake up an hour later and come to the kitchen like nothing had happened, ready for another day of school and another night of building whatever he was building. I was proud of him, proud of his dedication, his intelligence, his drive to create something meaningful. I just didn't understand what it was really for. I thought he was healing from the past through technology. I didn't know he was building defenses for a war that hadn't started yet. What Alex was building turned out to be something people would pay millions for. He was 15 when he finished the core system, spring 2020, middle of the pandemic. The world locked down and everyone suddenly lived online. Alex barely noticed the difference. He'd been living in his room with his computers for years already, connected to a digital world that made more sense to him than the physical one. I want to show you something, he said one afternoon in May, interrupting my reading. I followed him to his room, now equipped with 3 large monitors displaying different aspects of his work. He pulled up a program with a clean, professional interface. Nothing fancy, just functional boxes and buttons and text fields that looked like software you'd see in a corporate office. "This is it," he said, "the complete verification system. What exactly does it do?" He clicked through screens, showing me features I only half understood. It analyzes any digital document, checks if it's been altered, when it was created, if signatures match other known samples from the same person. It catches forgeries that human experts miss. I watched the program run through a sample document. Numbers appeared, graphs, detailed analysis results that looked like something from a forensics lab. So if someone creates a fake document, this catches it? Yes. The metadata, the digital fingerprints, the compression patterns, the timing signatures, it sees what people can't. It's like having a microscope for lies. That's incredible, Alex. He nodded matter-of-factly. I'm going to sell it. To who? Security companies, law firms, insurance companies. Anyone who needs to verify documents are authentic. He said it so calmly, like it was obvious. My 15-year-old grandson was going to sell software to major corporations. Do you know how to do that? I asked. I've been researching business development for 6 months. Of course he had. Alex started reaching out to companies that summer. He sent professional emails that I helped polish, though his direct communication style was often clearer than the corporate double talk most businesses used. He scheduled video conferences from his bedroom, talking to executives in suits while wearing his favorite Star Wars t-shirt. The first sale came in June 2020. A mid-sized security firm in Seattle bought a license for $35,000. I stared at the number on his laptop screen when he showed me the contract. $35,000, I said, barely believing it. It's less than market value, Alex said analytically, but it establishes proof of concept. Now I have a reference client. He was right. Once word spread that his system actually worked, other companies wanted demonstrations. Alex took conference calls in his room, using that same calm voice he used with me, explaining complex technical concepts to business people who understood just enough to know they needed what he was offering. By his 16th birthday in November 2020, he had 8 clients and enough money in his account to buy a house. Then the major offers started coming. Technology companies wanted exclusive licensing rights. Corporate fraud prevention firms wanted to integrate his system into their entire operations. The numbers jumped from thousands to hundreds of thousands. I need help, Alex told me in February 2021. I don't understand these contract terms. I found a business lawyer through my old Boeing contacts, Gregory Torres, who specialized in intellectual property and software licensing. He met with us on a Saturday morning at our kitchen table, spreading out 4 different contract offers like battle plans. These are substantial offers, he said, looking at Alex with new respect. You've built something genuinely valuable here. Alex nodded. Which option provides the best outcome? Gregory walked him through the choices. Licensing deals that would pay royalties over time, acquisition offers that would buy the technology outright for immediate payment. Alex listened carefully, asked specific questions about non-compete clauses and intellectual property rights. I want to sell it completely, he said finally. I don't want to manage licensing or provide ongoing support. Just transfer everything and be done. Gregory looked surprised. Are you certain? Licensing could generate more revenue long term. There's a 5-year non-compete restriction, Alex said. If I sell completely, I can't create competing verification software until I'm 21. That's acceptable. I glanced at him, wondering why he sounded so definite about his future plans. He sold the entire system in March 2021 for $4.8 million. $4.8 million. I couldn't process that number. I'd worked 28 years at Boeing and earned maybe half that amount over my entire career before taxes. The Portland Business Journal heard about the sale somehow. They wanted to interview the local teenage entrepreneur who'd created revolutionary document security software. I didn't want reporters in our house, didn't want them turning Alex into some inspiration story. But Alex said yes. The reporter, Jennifer Kim, came on a Thursday afternoon. She set up in our living room, asked if she could film Alex at his computer setup. "Can you explain what your software does?" she asked. "It verifies document authenticity through pattern recognition and metadata analysis," Alex said, looking directly at the camera with no self-consciousness. "It detects forgeries that manual inspection misses. What inspired you to create this?" I tensed, wondering how he'd answer. "I wanted to establish what was real," Alex said simply. "People lie. Documents reveal truth if you know how to read them properly." Jennifer smiled, probably thinking this was great material. "That's very insightful for someone your age. Do you have plans for the money?" "Not yet." She tried several more questions, but Alex's answers were short and factual, not the emotional human interest content she was hoping for. After 20 minutes, she thanked us and left. The segment aired Friday evening on the local news. Portland teen creates $1 million security software. They used maybe 90 seconds of the interview, added dramatic music, showed Alex at his computer looking focused and brilliant. I watched it with him. "How do you feel about being on television?" I asked when it ended. "Fine." But I noticed something different in the days after the broadcast aired. Alex wasn't celebrating his success. He seemed tense, watchful, like a sailor scanning the horizon for storms. I'd catch him staring out windows or sitting quietly with his blue cup, not drinking, just thinking. "You okay?" I'd ask. "Yes." But he wasn't. Something had shifted, some new tension I couldn't identify. 2 weeks after the news story aired, the doorbell rang on a Tuesday afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone. Alex was in his room, probably working on his next project. I opened the door, and there they were. A woman in a gray suit, expensive-looking, hair perfectly styled. A man beside her in a dark suit, carrying a leather briefcase that screamed attorney. The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, Tom." My stomach dropped. My hands went cold. After 13 years, I recognized that voice immediately. Sarah. She looked older, 13 years older. Lines around her mouth, tension in her jaw, but it was definitely her. The woman who'd abandoned her 5-year-old son and never looked back. "Alex," she said, looking past me into the house like she had some right to be there. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My body had forgotten how to function. "I'm Stephen Walsh," the man said. "Mrs. Mitchell's attorney. We'd like to speak with you about Alex's situation." "His situation?" I managed to say. Sarah's smile got tighter, more predatory. "Can we come in, Tom? This is important. It's about Alex's future." I should have said no, should have slammed the door in their faces, but I was frozen, shocked into paralysis by seeing the woman who'd destroyed our lives standing on my doorstep like nothing had happened. Alex appeared behind me in the hallway. He looked at Sarah with no emotion whatsoever on his face. No surprise, no recognition, no anger. Just analytical observation, like he was studying a specimen. "Come in," he said calmly. My legs moved without my permission. I stepped back. They entered my house, Sarah and her lawyer, and I felt like I might throw up. We sat at the kitchen table where Alex and I ate breakfast every morning, where we'd organized school meeting notes and planned his future. Now Sarah sat there with her manicured hands folded while her lawyer opened his briefcase like he was performing surgery. "Mr. Mitchell, we're here to discuss custody and financial guardianship," Walsh said in that smooth lawyer voice. "My client, Sarah Mitchell, has maintained legal parental rights to Alex and wishes to resume active custody." "Custody?" I said. "He's 18. "Precisely," Walsh replied. "Still legally a minor, and my client never formally terminated her parental rights. She's been co-parenting from a distance, maintaining contact through appropriate channels." "That's a lie," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "She hasn't called in 13 years. Sarah spoke then, using a soft, wounded voice that made me want to scream. "Tom, I know you've done a wonderful job raising Alex, but he needs his mother now, especially with the money and the media attention. He needs guidance through this transition." "He has guidance." Walsh pulled out papers, documents with official-looking seals and signatures. These demonstrate that Mrs. Mitchell maintained her legal parental rights. She's documented her financial support and regular communication over the years. She's entitled to custody and given Alex's minor status, management of his financial assets until he reaches majority. I looked at the papers. They looked real, professional, convincing. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might have a heart attack. "Those are fake," I said, but I had no proof. "They're properly notarized and filed with the appropriate agencies," Walsh said calmly. "Unless you can prove otherwise, they establish my client's legal standing." I looked at Alex. He was watching Sarah with that same blank expression, but I could see something calculating in his eyes. "Alex," I said quietly, "what do we do?" He looked at me for 1 second, then back at Sarah. "We should get a lawyer," he said. Getting a lawyer was easier than fighting with one. I found Patricia Rodriguez through a referral, family law attorney with 20 years of experience fighting custody cases. She met with us 3 days later at our house. I brought every document I had, years of school records, therapy notes, medical appointments, every piece of paper proving I'd raised Alex alone. Patricia examined Sarah's documents for over an hour. "These look professionally prepared," she said carefully. "Very convincing." "But they're fake," I said. "She's lying about everything." "I believe you, Mr. Mitchell. But without concrete proof these documents are forged, her case looks strong legally. She never terminated parental rights. Schools and doctors accepted your guardianship informally, but there's no court order transferring custody." The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Judge Williams sat at the bench, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who looked like she'd seen every kind of lie imaginable. Sarah sat with Walsh, dressed like a concerned mother. We sat with Patricia, and I felt like we were outgunned. Walsh presented his case smoothly. Sarah Mitchell, devoted mother, maintained consistent involvement despite personal challenges. He laid out the forged documents like they were holy scripture. Sarah testified with perfect composure. She claimed she'd visited monthly, sent money regularly, called to check on Alex's progress. She provided specific dates, exact dollar amounts: December 2012, $300. April 2014, $500. A detailed financial record of support that never happened. I sat there listening to her lies, wanting to jump up and scream the truth. Patricia presented our evidence, my binders full of real documentation, but Judge Williams looked skeptical. Without formal guardianship papers, Sarah's claim had legal standing. "Mrs. Mitchell," the judge said, "I understand you've been the primary caregiver, but legally, without proof, the mother abandoned her rights. Her claim appears valid." My world was collapsing. Then Judge Williams looked at Alex. "Young man, do you wish to speak?" Long pause. Alex sat perfectly still. Then he stood. "Yes, Your Honor. I have evidence." My heart stopped. "What evidence?" "Approach," the judge said. Alex picked up a bag I hadn't noticed, walked to the witness stand with complete confidence, and pulled out his laptop. "Your Honor, I built a system that verifies document authenticity. I'd like to analyze the documents Mrs. Mitchell presented." The courtroom erupted. Walsh jumped up immediately. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We weren't informed of this evidence during discovery. Your client presented fraudulent documents 6 weeks ago," Alex said, looking directly at Walsh with no intimidation. "I'm presenting analysis of those documents now." Judge Williams studied Alex intently. "Proceed, but this better be relevant." Alex connected his laptop to the courtroom display system. The screen lit up, showing Sarah's custody documents in high resolution. They looked official, convincing, legitimate. "These documents claim to be created between 2011 and 2021, Alex said in his clear, analytical voice. "But the digital metadata shows they were actually created 6 weeks ago, immediately after the news story about my software sale aired." He clicked through screens showing creation dates, file properties, editing histories, all time-stamped, all recent. The evidence was undeniable. Walsh objected desperately. "Metadata can be manipulated." "Not in this case," Alex said calmly. "The signature verification reveals additional inconsistencies." He pulled up a comparison showing Sarah's real signature from his birth certificate in 2005, then ran his verification program on the signatures from the custody documents. Statistical analysis filled the screen. Pressure patterns, letter formation, spacing inconsistencies. These signatures were forged, Alex stated. The analysis shows 89% probability of fraud, well above the legal threshold for forgery. Judge Williams leaned forward. How can you be certain of this analysis? I built this verification system over 7 years, Your Honor. It's the same technology I sold last month for $4.8 million. The purchaser verified its accuracy before acquisition. The judge's eyebrows rose. Then Alex did something that left the courtroom speechless. Mrs. Mitchell claims she visited me in December 2013, he said, pulling up a new screen. Here's my grandfather's calendar from that month showing our actual schedule. Here are time-stamped photos from that week. Here are therapy session notes from December 9th confirming no maternal contact. Here's my school attendance record showing I was present every day. Screen after screen of evidence, methodically destroying every lie. Mrs. Mitchell claims she sent financial support. Here are 13 years of my grandfather's complete bank records. No deposits from Sarah Mitchell, not $1. Bank statements appeared, every transaction highlighted and verified. She claims she called regularly. Here are phone company records from 2011 to present. 0 calls from her number after December 24, 2011. Walsh was frantically shuffling papers looking for some way to object. But you can't argue with mathematics. April 2015. She claims she sent $500 for therapy costs. Here's the bank statement showing no such deposit. Here's my grandfather's receipt showing he paid out of pocket. Here's the canceled check. Every single claim Sarah had made, Alex systematically demolished with documented proof. The courtroom was dead silent except for the quiet hum of his laptop. Judge Williams looked at Sarah, whose face had gone completely pale. Mrs. Mitchell, can you explain these discrepancies? Sarah's confident demeanor crumbled. The metadata could be wrong, she stammered. I mean, I did visit. I know I was there. When exactly? The judge asked coldly. December 2013, I remember clearly. Do you have any proof? Receipts? Photos? Witnesses? Sarah was falling apart. I didn't keep records. I was there. I know I was there. Judge Williams had seen enough. Mrs. Mitchell, did you or did you not falsify these custody documents? No, my lawyer said, I've heard enough, the judge said firmly. She ruled from the bench without recess. Sarah Mitchell, I find your testimony not credible and your documentation fraudulent. Full custody and guardianship is permanently awarded to Thomas Mitchell. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the district attorney for investigation of perjury and fraud. Sarah made a choking sound. Walsh looked like he wanted to disappear. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel struck with finality. Outside the courthouse, standing in the Portland afternoon sun, I finally understood what Alex had been building all these years. You knew, I said. You've been protecting us since you were 9 years old. Alex nodded once. No celebration, no emotion, just quiet satisfaction. 6 months later, our lives looked completely different. Alex couldn't work in document security anymore due to his non-compete agreement, so he started a new company, software testing and quality assurance. I'm hiring people like me, he told me over breakfast one morning. Autistic people see patterns others miss. His first employee was Peter, a young man from our old therapy group. Then Diana, then Carlos, people who thought differently, who noticed what others overlooked. Alex was building a company where being different was an advantage. I visited his small office one afternoon. 8 desks, everyone wearing headphones, working in focused quiet. Peter saw me and waved. Mr. Mitchell, he said, taking off his headphones. You told my parents I wasn't broken when I was 10. Just different. Alex says the same thing now. I couldn't speak, just nodded. Sarah received 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service at an autism resource center. 3 months into her sentence, I was dropping off donated supplies and saw her reading to nonverbal children on the floor. She looked up, saw me. We both froze. She looked exhausted, humbled, completely different from the woman who'd arrived with a lawyer. The center director mentioned to me later that volunteer comes in extra hours, says she's learning what she should have learned years ago. On a Tuesday evening, I brought dinner to Alex's apartment as usual. His blue cup sat on the counter, chipped but still his favorite. We ate quietly, comfortably. Alex put down his fork. Tom, he said, looking directly at me, I know what you sacrificed for me. Your social life, your freedom, your retirement plans. You could have sent me away like she did. You didn't. You're my grandson, I said simply. You chose it. Every day for 13 years, he continued, even when I couldn't say thank you. You were worth every single day, I told him. He nodded. I know that now. We sat in comfortable silence. Then I kissed his forehead and headed home, driving the familiar streets with a smile on my face. My phone buzzed at a red light, a text from Alex. Thank you. 2 words that meant everything. So that's my story. Thanks for listening.